So this is part two of will property prices keep going up in the UK, and last week I shot the first section of this, had intended to release all of that footage at the one time, discovered I had 40 minutes of footage, and so therefore I've broken it down into parts one and part two. So this is part two, and we're going to cover in this video three further aspects. One is, why does it cost at entry level more than 2 to 3 times your annual income? It used to be that was the case at one point, that's what house prices were, but now it costs considerably more than that. So why is that the case? Second, when is what causes property markets to crash, and when is the next one likely to be? And third, probably most importantly, what can you do about it to help you in your situation? So let's get on with the next part of the video. Hi, my name is Jim J. Davidson, and I first invested in property in 1973. I completed my first new build development in 2006. As you can imagine, I've made lots of mistakes along the way, but thankfully I've got some things right, and I've managed to build a property development business. In this channel, I want to help you on your journey and perhaps share some of that knowledge with you. And so through this channel, which I hope you will subscribe to, or through our membership app, which I hope you will join, and incidentally it's free, you can learn a little bit more about building houses and building a property development business. The app is available wherever you get your app from, whether you're on iOS or you have an Android phone, or you can get accesses on desktop, and you'll find a link in the description below. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of this video, and please post your comments in the description below if you have any comments to make. So let's talk about now the entry-level houses, which used to be 2 to 3 times yearly salary, and is now significantly more than that. Oh, incidentally, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe now. We're always looking for more subscribers, and if you're liking this video, please like and share it. So anyway, going back to the price of houses going up. So again, if we go back to 1970s, the only people that actually, and I'm talking not about development now, but I'm talking about if you were wanting to buy a house, the place that you had to go to get the finance was a building society. Now, we have building societies today. They're a bit different from the building societies that we had then. And that was the only place that you could get it. Banks didn't lend. Banks didn't actually get into mortgage lending until the 1980s. So the only place you could go for a mortgage was a building society. And at that time, they had a certain criteria. First of all, they wanted you to be saving money in the building society, so you needed to save money with the building society before they would even consider you for lending. And so once you had done that for a few years, then they would consider you for lending, and they would lend you based on your salary, and it was usually somewhere between 2 to 2.5 times your salary. And part of the reason for that was that we were in much higher interest rate territory. So I remember in the 1970s, my parents saying to me, I don't think we'll ever see interest rates return below 10%. They had moved into the plus 10% area. Not as bad as they became eventually when the highest rate I paid was 17%, but they were in that territory. And so therefore, in terms of affordability, because a larger amount of your money was going towards the interest payment, then typically they give you a much smaller multiple. And in fact, when you actually got your first statement back, I remember the first mortgage statement I got back, and it had shown, at that time I had a mortgage of £6,500, and I had paid off less than £100 because most of the payment had gone into the mortgage interest rate and not into the capital repayment. Also, the term of mortgage was shorter, so it tended to be 20 years. and was mostly based on the male partner's salary. In other words, the husband's salary. A lot of them were reluctant to include a wife's salary. They kind of felt that was unsustainable, that the wife would then go off and have children, and so therefore they were very reluctant to lend. Those that did lend would lend on 1 times of their salary. So you would get husband 2.5 at best, and then 1 times the wife's salary. And so therefore that was the maximum amount that you could lend, that you could borrow, and therefore if that's how much you could borrow, then that was going to keep the prices from going up. Having said that, we were in the 1970s and they did go up rapidly, but that was to do inflation. But then incomes also went up, although they didn't really entirely keep pace with the rate of inflation. So that's the first factor. So then what happens is that first of all, the banks get into the lending in the 1980s. They start off in this area here of lending, but then they now start to include their wife's salary, which then becomes, so you get husband and wife, and they get 2.5 times, and they're getting 2.5 times. So now suddenly there's a bigger pool of money that's available for your mortgage. And then as we get through sort of like the mid 1980s and further on, we're starting to see the effect of different economic policy. Interest rates are starting to come down, and then we actually get into, therefore, a lower amount of your mortgage payment is then attributable to interest, and so therefore the banks are able to lend a higher multiple of your salary, and more of that is then going to go into the actual payment. The other thing that did exist in here was that at that time you did get mortgage relief on your mortgage payments. That was abolished. There was the first thing that was abolished. I won't go really into it because there's various things that they phased out. But essentially today there is no borrowing, there is no mortgage interest relief for your own personal residence. But then in addition to that, interest rates then obviously started to track down because the bank lending rate came down. Then banks became much more aggressive in the competition for particular lending, and so therefore you have what's called the margin that they operate. So if you have, let's say, a 6%, let's say there was a Bank of England rate, so typically they might have put 4% on top of that, and so their actual lending rate might have been 10%. But what then got squeezed is this amount here, and this came down to maybe like just 1%, or even in certain situations I saw it come down to 0.7%. So the actual spread between what the base lending rate by the Bank of England was and the amount that they added on top of this, the margin that they added on top of this became much more contracted. They became much more competitive. Things like comparison sites then started to evolve with the internet, and so therefore again it pushed the affordability of what people could borrow pushed up, and therefore that then ended up pushing up house prices. In actual fact, what it did was it then pushed up land prices, and then going back to this whole all economic activity ends in the land. So the greater money that came through here then ended up in land values, and therefore that pushes up land values. And so just one final point on this, the multiples then became greater, and so now you're talking about maybe 5 times the multiple, 4 to 5 times the multiple, but you're also talking about mortgages that have gone now from 20 years to 25, 30, and now I've even heard of 35-year mortgages. In fact, in Japan they have something like 100-year mortgages, and imagine, here's your inheritance, it's our mortgage. So I'm not sure that we really want to get there, but there has been a push for eventually 40-year mortgages, and all of this loosening and making what seems good government policy to make it affordable actually ends up pushing up the prices, and so therefore it continually just stays out of reach. And so it would take a real fundamental rethink of how we do things, and that is almost unpalatable which is the reason it will probably never happen. So what will cause the next house price crash, and when is it likely to happen? Well, again, I've done a video on this, but essentially what happens is that even though I talked about all the activity goes into the land price, what happens with that land price is that eventually it spirals up, and so you end up with a spiral where it reaches to the point where somewhere about here it becomes too expensive. But this is incidentally is an 18-year cycle, and it's repeated itself fairly consistently for the last 200 years, with the exception of the world wars where it disrupted it a little bit, but it's been fairly consistent. And essentially what you have is you have this period where it falls off, so it comes down here, and you have 4 years of contraction, then it starts to move up, then you have a mid market retraction, a slowdown, and not a crash, and then it accelerates again. And this bit is always greater than this bit. This bit tends to favor the already high price areas like London, and so the other areas tend to get ignored, so they pretty much go and even their trajectory is much more like that, but then their trajectory then becomes a bit more like that after this mid cycle. So we're currently about here, so we're sort of like in this lift off, but at this point here, which is usually about 2 years from the peak, there is land prices become unaffordable. And so what then happens is that the larger developers start to find that they can't develop, and therefore they pull back. They can't make the numbers work, so they start to contract. It takes about 2 years before the stock market realizes this. The stock market then crashes, and following the stock market crash, the property market then crashes, and this then takes the land value and drives the land value down. So about 2 years after that, land prices are really started to move down, and certainly at that period of time is a great time to buy land. But in terms of, and so you obviously, as a developer, the idea is to maximize the amount of cash you've got here, so you're able to then take advantage of that situation there. And so where are we? We're at 2021, and here is going to be about 2024, and here is going to be about 2026. And so that's the current trajectory. And so it's the expense of land that ultimately causes the property market to crash. And so therefore you need to strategize so that you can take advantage of that situation. So what can you do to help yourself? Well, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on, whether you are a developer or a self-builder, there'll be a slightly different strategy. As a developer, you have a massive opportunity here to be able to maximize on what you are doing here in terms of development. So you build up a big cash amount of money so you can then take advantage of this situation when land will be cheap, or indeed housing itself will be cheap, because cash will be king. The banks will not be lending, they will be repairing their balance sheets because they'll have overextended themselves. They're still being a bit cautious, but that caution will start to move away, and you'll certainly find by 2024 that they'll be just chucking money at people left, right and centre. It'll be very easy to get finance, and this is sort of like what they call the winner's curse. And so therefore you need to be careful just this period of time. This is when you need to be more cautious. I'm not saying you stop, but you need to be more cautious so as you can then take advantage of the 2 to 4 years later when the values will be very much depressed. And the critical thing here is buying land at the right price, because what you will find is that on-market land will continue to rise very expensively, but if you find the off-market land and use the principles that we teach, then you will find that you can actually find that and make it a viable proposition by being able to buy the land at the right price, making sure your project stacks up. Similarly, if you are a self-builder, then again it comes back to the same thing. Building, if you do it properly, you can save yourself about 25% at least on the actual price that you would pay for that equivalent house on the market. Now, self-builders are a bit different. They sometimes want to spend some of that additional development money in up-speccing their house, and that's okay, because it's your own personal house, it's a place you want to live, you want it in the style that you do. But rather than taking an existing house and then having to upgrade it to that specification, you are able to use those cost benefits savings and be able to do that. And similarly, you have to be able to find land at the right price, and that's certainly unlikely to be on market land. And even if you do find on market land, you need to be able to properly evaluate it. I know of a particular self-builder I was speaking to about a year ago who bought a piece of land at what seemed a very good price, 60,000, but then had to spend another 40,000 on that piece of land before they could even start digging the foundations, because there was lots of factors in there in terms of survey fees that they hadn't expected for things like bats and an existing building that had to be taken down, and so they had to prove that it was beyond economically being salvageable, and lots of other things. They had to prepare the ground, so there's lots of tests and reports and lots of delays involved, which ultimately pushed the price up of that particular piece of land to 100,000 with development, in other words, full planning in place. Now, depending on what part of the country you live in, you may think that is cheap. In this area, that was a way beyond what that value of that land was worth. So it's very important to get that right. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about our Find It course, we're about to move into a phase 2 of that, and we'll have different options available. You'll find a link in the description below, but also if you'd like to join our membership community, which is members.builditandprosper.com, and you can get lots of different information there. We've got some free courses on there. We've got a community where you can post your questions and get them answered. So worthwhile community to join. It's growing. It's got lots of stuff still to be introduced. So it's a potentially flourishing community which you can be part of at the beginning and just watch it grow and see and get more information that you need in order to do what you want to do, whether that's development or self-building. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe now. If you like this video, give us a like and share. If you're new to the channel, have a look around. There is I think 90 plus videos now. We're getting towards 100 videos, so there's lots of content there for you to consume, and we're publishing every week. So until the next time, please stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos, then click to watch the next video. Please remember to visit our website at builditandprosper.com to get our app, or click on the button on the YouTube header if you're on desktop.